I want to talk about some of the more specific impacts that you see these sanctions having on the US economy and the global economy, because you're saying that food and energy prices will continue to rise across the Western world for the foreseeable future. So elaborate what you see happening there.
Yeah, thank you. Now, coincidentally, I happen to be sitting this week in Geneva, Switzerland. And Geneva is the home to a lot of the world's big commodity trading houses, energy and otherwise. I've had some conversations, some discussions, formal and informal. And it's pretty clear that oil traders are seeing an environment, and energy traders are seeing an environment like they have not seen. I think there is concern that things are going to get worse before they get better. We're seeing impact across, I mentioned US inventories are going down despite the release of the SPR. We're seeing gas supplies are increasing, but that's only because consumers are taking a pause on prices at above $5 a gallon. One of the real issues is natural gas. As I mentioned, Europe is highly dependent on Russian natural gas and natural gas for its supply. The spread between EU natural gas and US natural gas is blown up. I think there's a premium of about 120% right now between the two. And I think there is significant supply chain constraints coming that have not been worked out of the system. Now, why does that matter for food? So we know that it is going to keep energy prices high as a result of all that. Well, let's take the US as an example. In the US, somewhere around 75% of all of the food that we consume, everything we buy from the grocery store, from the supercenter, whatever it is, that food got to our local distribution center by a truck. That truck runs on diesel. That diesel is used for a truck that's often owned by an owner-operator, i.e. by the trucker himself, who's finding it incredibly difficult to make ends meet and run his truck or her truck profitably. So you're seeing increasing price pressure on food, but you're also seeing actual supply chain issues, right? So we've got no formal embargo on Russian grain, but we've got blockades. We've got issues in terms of getting grain out of the Ukraine, Russia, fertilizer. We had the head of the African Union come out about 4 weeks ago and point to this as an issue, point to SWIFT as an issue, and that the African nations are not able to use the SWIFT network to pay Russia for fertilizer, to pay for these products upon which many of the African nations depend. And he was raising a bit of an alarm, saying this is not just about prices. This is a food security issue.
Right.
America may be in a different position. We have an abundance of food stock. We're a big producer of grains, big producer of all kinds of things. But globally, it could be a real issue. And I don't think the U.S. can escape it from rising prices, potentially with the risk of shortages or even rationing, which would be unprecedented, unbelievable. But I don't think one can completely take it out of the view of potential outcomes and risks here.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Michael, that you say African nations are saying we can't use SWIFT to pay Russia, which goes back to your other point that they're just going to come up with another system where they can pay Russia, and that's going to cut the U.S. out of the picture. But another thing that I want to focus on, of course, is the inflation that we're seeing in the U.S. And we know the Fed is trying to bring down inflation by raising rates. We've recently had the Fed's preferred inflation measure coming out at a multi-decade high. Core personal consumption expenditure prices rising 4.7% from a year ago. It was 0.2 percentage points less than the previous month, but still around levels last seen in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. So can the U.S. bring down inflation and maintain sanctions? Could that even happen?
Might be able to do it by maintaining sanctions, but they cannot do it without without a real recession. If you look at what's happened, a couple of things. So just as a background, I started writing about the inflation issue in the middle of 2000. Everyone said, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. We've had 30 years of deflation. Everyone said inflation was going to come after the global financial crisis. There are some big issues at play here around U.S. inflation. And by the way, the U.S. statistics on inflation, we're leading the world. Right now, our inflation is higher than anywhere in Europe. It's higher than the UK. It's very unusual. A very unusual situation. It's been rising for well over a year. I know there's been a lot of talk around, well, this is Putin's inflation. Inflation hit 5% back in August of last year. It hit 7% in December, long before the invasion occurred. The issue here, if you'll allow me, is we have to go all the way back to the global financial crisis. From 2007 until now, the combined forces of quantitative easing and stimulus policies, all of the money that has been pushed into the US economy over 15 years equates to a roughly tripling of the total US dollar money supply M2 basis from 2007 to today. Tripling, okay? Now, prices haven't risen or didn't rise through the crisis initially, and people dismissed inflation as a result and said, oh, well, see, we can increase the money supply, nothing will happen. This is the whole idea behind modern monetary theory, a complete lunacy of an idea that basically says we can run deficits, the government can run deficits every year, we can increase our national debt, it doesn't matter because we can always issue more. What happens in inflations, and if you look back over the history of 20th century inflations, from the worst of it in the Weimar Republic, but even other inflations in the US, other inflations in Europe and around the world, the rise in prices always lags the rise in money supply, often by several years.
Yeah.
But it never fails to meet it. If you look at all the data, somewhere between 60 and 100% rise in prices to match the rise in the monetary base. What that means is that all else equal, even without a worsening sort of shock, just running its course, inflation may run somewhere between 8 and 12% over the medium term, 3 to 5 years, in my view, just to catch up. Now, Keynesians disagree with me profoundly on this, but I think I'm right, and I hate to say it.